Hello, everybody. This is Marshall Fightlin, your favorite psychologist, and I've been doing a series on the four hinge virtues, the four cardinal virtues or hinge strengths. The one that we saw last time was the one on prudence, which is also called wisdom. We still have to go through temperance, fortitude, and justice. Today, we're going to do the one on temperance. So let's get into it. Temperance is the strength that allows you or enables you to respond properly to pleasure. Now, when a baby is born, it does not have temperance. It has a built-in automatic response of yes. Every time it wants something pleasant, it just goes for it. And the metaphor for that, or the symbol for that, is breastfeeding. When an infant is hungry, it cries, it wants the breast, and it cannot not have it. So that's when a child is born, it is programmed, hardwired to say yes to pleasure, not to say no. Now, the upbringing of a child is slowly to educate that child so that he is able to say yes or no, depending on the circumstances and on what it is, what the pleasure is. You have to override the yes of the baby with a program that allows the child to say yes or no. And when you've done that successfully, the child then has temperance. We said before that last time in my last webcast that prudence or wisdom regulates the other four cardinal virtues. And so it regulates temperance. And how that plays out is that temperance you can try to be temperate, or you can try to teach temperance too soon, too much, or too late, not enough. And right in the middle is where the strength of the virtue lies, because right in the middle, it's governed by wisdom, by prudence. You've taught prudence or you've practiced temperance the right way. So, for example, you can have someone who says, I am going to say no just about all the time to pleasure. So I will not drink. I will not have any sweets. I will not enjoy any television. I will not recreate. I will just work and sleep and so forth. A person who does that is going to become a very tense, unhappy person because he is trying to practice temperance excessively. He's trying to be too temperate. And that means that prudence isn't involved in his practice of temperance. That's where you have too much temperance. Then on the other hand, you can have too little. That's where a person tends to be impulsive and just do what he feels like doing when he feels like doing it and never gives a thought to, is this appropriate? Should I perhaps say no? And the extreme of not enough temperance, of course, is what psychologists call addiction. And that's where there have been changes in your brain that prevent you from saying no, and where to learn how to say no in that instance can be extremely laborious. Now, when you're raising children, you're trying to teach them temperance. And again, you're trying to do it wisely. So you don't want to make their life too severe, and in denying them too severely the pleasures that a child normally enjoys. And on the other hand, you don't want to be too lenient and to allow the child every pleasure that the child wants. Again, you want to be somewhere in the middle. Usually this plays out by requiring the child to moderate food and sweets and entertainment. Those are the areas in which a child very early on is going to grow in the area of temperance. So you have family meals. You don't just nosh. You don't just eat every time you're hungry and just nibble throughout the day. But there are formal meals where everybody sits down together and you have your meal. And the child learns that if he's hungry at 11 o'clock, he needs to wait until noon when lunchtime is, and then he's going to have his lunch. So he learns how to wait. Part of temperance is learning how to wait before you enjoy a pleasure. You can see the value of that in Lent, the practice of Lent, where you give up something and you don't enjoy that thing until Lent is over. And paradoxically, the people who get the most enjoyment out of life are the people who practice temperance. Most of you who used to give up candy when you were children during Lent can remember what that first piece of candy tasted like after Easter. It never tasted so good, and it was nowhere near as good as the candy that you could have every day. The child is learning then, or should be being introduced to the notion of waiting, of wanting to eat something but not having it. Sweets is a special part of that issue. It's not a bad idea to require a child to eat a meal before he has his sweets. The sweets are the dessert, and we traditionally eat dessert last of all. There's a special problem with concentrated sugar, because concentrated sugar is not only pleasant, but it affects the brain, and it overwhelms the pleasure centers of the brain and makes it very difficult to deal with it in moderation. So parents have to be very careful about exposing their children to things with concentrated sugar in them. That would be any pastry, any dessert practically except fruit, ice cream, and so forth. Nowadays, there are special challenges for parents raising children and trying to educate them in temperance that my parents didn't have. And one of them is television. Television, and also in general, computer screens, telephone screens, and so forth. They are very pleasant to watch. And so parents need to make a decision. How old should my child be before I introduce my child to one of these screens? And every parent will have a somewhat different answer from every other parent. You can't give a rule. It certainly isn't a good idea to prop an infant up in front of a television screen and let the child sit there and watch television for hours and hours, using it as a babysitter. That's clearly an extreme, and that's something that parents would want to avoid. On the other hand, not letting the children ever watch anything on television would be another extreme. Again, in the middle stands virtue, and that's where you want to fall. It's good for parents to who are exposing their children to the screen to also expose them to books and to discussion about ideas and so forth, so that they don't get all their learning from just sitting passively in front of the screen, but that they also get their learning through books and through discussion. Another area that helps, it's an area where temperance is developed, is waiting one's turn or sharing. Children, again, need to learn how to wait their turn. If they want something, it doesn't mean they're going to get it instantly. They need to wait their turn. And also, if they want something and someone else wants the same thing, they need to learn how to negotiate and share instead of hogging. And you can really see in little children that they aren't programmed for that. That they're programmed to just hog and take what they want, and they're programmed to get their desires met instantly. And that program needs to be overridden by the parental, gentle but insistent, making them wait, making them share, having conditions under which they can enjoy things like after supper and so forth. As I said, children don't react well. You can tell that they aren't programmed for that. And so they tend to react badly when you introduce them to that. They may have tantrums where they throw themselves on the ground and kick. Or they may have a complete and total meltdown where they start crying and sobbing. Or they may start screaming and yelling angrily. Depending on how old the child is, I'm thinking of a 2-year-old. What you need to do then is to allow, or how will I put it, allow and validate the outburst, in the sense of you don't scold or shame the child for having the outburst, but you don't reward it either. So, for example, you might require the child to have a timeout. You might send the child to his room until he is calmed down. But slowly, and then when the child comes back, you're fine. You tell the child basically, if you're going to have a meltdown, go into the bedroom until you can calm down and be nice. When you can be nice, come on back and we'll talk some more. And then you're fine. All of this is preparing the child for puberty and what is going to happen when the whole issue of regulating pleasure in the sexual sphere comes along. But that's what I'm going to deal with next time. So I want to again alert you that I have a psychological service that I provide, a telephone consulting where people can call me up and I consult with them on the phone. You can find out more about that on my website, which is CatholicPsychConsult.com. So I will see you next time.